He was supposed to be the guy, the golden child, the prince that was promised. When Trevor Lawrence entered the NFL in 2021, he wasn't just another number one pick. He was supposed to change everything. The Jaguars thought they were drafting destiny itself, a generational talent in the mold of Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. But 5 years later, destiny still hasn't shown up. We've seen flashes of greatness, and just as many reminders that maybe, just maybe, we all got played. So what happened? How did one of the most hyped prospects in football history become one of the league's biggest question marks? Did Trevor Lawrence fool everyone? Or did we fool ourselves? Let's find out. But before we talk about what Trevor Lawrence has become, we need to remember who he was supposed to be. The can't-miss kid, the future of football, the next great one. At Clemson, he lived up to every bit of that hype. Over 3 seasons he spent at the school, he threw for over 10,000 yards and 90 touchdowns across just 36 games, leading the Tigers to a staggering 34-2 record as a starter. As a true freshman, he also guided the team to a crushing 44-16 national championship win over Nick Saban's Alabama in 2018, earning the game's Offensive MVP award. The excitement over Lawrence's declaration for the NFL draft was up there with any quarterback in league history. Lawrence joined that top echelon of most hyped draft prospects in league history alongside the likes of John Elway, Peyton Manning, and Andrew Luck, as general managers and coaches salivated over his college tape, certain that he already looked pro-ready, and that he would absolutely be a success in the league. To underline just how generational a talent people thought Lawrence could be, just ask CBS draft analyst Ryan Wilson. I remember having this conversation with colleagues. Would they take Joe Burrow, who had just been taken number 1 overall by the Bengals, or would they prefer Lawrence, who still had another year of college? The unanimous response I got back? Lawrence. After a dreadful 2020 season, the Jaguars were the team lucky enough to win the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes with the number 1 overall pick. And yet, they totally wasted his first year under head coach Urban Meyer, with the team winning just 3 games in one of the most dysfunctional seasons we've seen in recent league history. However, under new head coach Doug Peterson, 2022 was much better, despite a 3-7 start. The Jags went 6-1 down the stretch, with Lawrence living up to all the hype in those final 7 games. In those games, he threw 15 touchdowns and just 2 picks, and he looked great doing it. In real time, it really felt like we were all watching a future superstar have his breakout into the league's elite, guiding his team through close games, with the final victory against Tennessee securing an AFC South title that looked unthinkable just 2 months earlier. And in that wildcard round, Lawrence pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in league history against the Chargers. Despite being down 27-0 just before the half, Lawrence stayed cool and composed in the second half, throwing 4 touchdowns and leading a final drive that ended in a field goal to seal an astonishing victory and put himself and the Jags back on the map. Despite a loss in Kansas City in the divisional round, it really felt like Trevor Lawrence had arrived, and many were expecting him to reach the next level, including Stephen A. Smith.
For years to come, because that's something that's hard to overcome. He didn't overcome it the next season. He overcame it 15 minutes later after a halftime break and came out there and threw damn 4 touchdowns, okay, and spearheaded them to victory 31-30. He was absolutely spectacular.
There's never been any doubt that he has the tools to be a great quarterback. The arm strength, the accuracy, and the ability to step up in big moments. But the last 2 seasons saw Jacksonville fail to make the playoffs twice, with Lawrence's shortcomings being a major part of this. Despite this though, Lawrence was given his $55 million a year extension during this time, with many questioning whether he truly deserved this kind of money.
This guy, throws 4 interceptions and a half, or loses 5 straight games to boot us out of the playoffs. Maybe we look in another direction before we make a $200 million investment.
Which takes us to the start of the 2025 season. Now Lawrence's 5th season in the NFL, which would be with a 3rd head coach. Liam Cohen was appointed off the back of his efforts in resurrecting Baker Mayfield's career as offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, with the Jags faithful hoping that he could work that magic again here. As for offensive weapons, the Jags aren't the most stacked team in the league, but there's clearly plenty for Lawrence to work with here. Brian Thomas Jr. had a superb rookie season in 2024, putting up nearly 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns despite the rest of the team's struggles. And the team used the second overall pick on Travis Hunter this year, even trading up to give Lawrence more options in the passing game. In Travis Etienne, they've got an excellent dual-threat running back who's broken the 1,400-yard mark for scrimmage yards twice in his career. And the offensive line is solid as well, bolstered in the offseason by guard Patrick McCarry, who arrived from Baltimore in free agency. So, with an impressive new head coach and the offense that's been built around him, he doesn't really have any excuses left. So, how has Trevor Lawrence's 2025 season been? As always with Lawrence, it's complicated. He'll still have those moments where he looks like that guy we saw at Clemson back in 2018. Moments where he'll zip the ball through tight windows to Brian Thomas Jr., or where he'll throw a superb ball on the run to Travis Hunter. And he passes the eye test as well as anyone. His highlight reel still looks great, and his performance in the 31-28 thriller against Kansas City contained plenty of great throws and runs, which you might expect from a $55 million a year quarterback. But in that game, Lawrence also threw a dreadful pick in the fourth quarter straight to Trent McDuffie, which set up KC for an easy score inside the Jags' 20-yard line. Ultimately, Lawrence would come out with the victory, winning the game on a comical last-minute touchdown run in which he tripped and still managed to get up and find the end zone. Lawrence and the Jags have found a way to win in several close games this year, but he hasn't had a flawless game or even a great game in any of them. The messy Week 3 encounter at home to the Texans was perhaps the best example of Lawrence's shortcomings being covered, as the team managed a 17-10 victory despite him completing just half of his 40 pass attempts and throwing an interception and no touchdowns. Interceptions have always been a problem for Trevor Lawrence in the NFL, and he threw 46 of them during his first 4 seasons, the 4th most in football during that time. As we've said, he's shown an ability to shake off bad plays, but too often he ends up putting his team in deep holes with his decision making, having had 13 multiple interception games in his NFL career. And his completion percentage seems to be regressing. He had problems with accuracy early in his career, but during the last few years, he'd managed to get towards league average, hovering around the 65% mark. In 2025, however, he's been the second least accurate QB in football, with only Cam Ward faring worse through 7 weeks. And of course, Ward has the excuse of being a rookie on the worst team in football, just as Lawrence was in 2021. But Lawrence has no such excuse, and he's still far too inconsistent to be considered one of the league's elite, despite the fact that he's paid like one of them. These questions intensified after the Jaguars' 35-7 loss to the Rams in London in Week 7, a game in which the Rams were out of sight very quickly. This was his 67th start in the league, and we're still talking about the potential that Trevor Lawrence has. After the game, NBC's Chris Sims said,
"There's still a feel element that Trevor Lawrence does not have, and I think it's part of why you see Liam Cohn get frustrated with him on the sidelines at times and shake his head, or even like when he trips and falls and then runs for a touchdown and laugh, because he's a little bit like, I don't know what I'm going to get from this guy. I think it's a little bit of what he's going through right now."
Sims' comments sounded like a man discussing an inexperienced rookie dealing with some teething problems, not a 5-year veteran who earns more than Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. If Trevor Lawrence hasn't ascended to the NFL's top tier by now, is he ever going to? And has he just been fooling us all this whole time? Crucially, have the Jacksonville Jaguars been fooled? They've obviously put a lot of faith and money into making this work, and since they totally botched his first year in the league with the embarrassing Urban Meyer hire, they've made plenty of moves to give him the best chance to succeed. He's had 2 offensive-minded coaches in Doug Peterson and Liam Cohen. He's been given 2 first-round wide receivers in a row, and he's been blessed with Travis Etienne in the backfield in the last few years. Yet, he still doesn't look like that guy. But of course, the Jags gave him the big second contract, so this has to work out for them in the short and long term. But will it? Well, 2025 could be the season where we find out once and for all. Even at the outset of this season, some were framing this as a make-or-break year in Trevor Lawrence's career. ESPN's Mike Tannenbaum discussed this in the preseason, going over so many of the core issues in his game.
But I'll push back on that because, Dan talked about his mental mindset. I think it's much more about his fundamentals. He was coached by Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson knows how to coach quarterbacks. He was 60.6% completion percentage, which was 31st in the NFL. He was 29th in completion above expectation. That's not good enough for somebody that's that good. And Doug Peterson is a fundamental-based quarterback. So to me, this is about his fundamentals more than anything. I know he was hurt last year. I think he's got a little bit of a free pass. I know he has guaranteed money next year, Greeny, but to me, it's getting late early. And if I'm Liam Cohn and their new general manager, I'm thinking about drafting a quarterback if we don't see meaningful improvement.
The idea of drafting a potential replacement quarterback by 2026 would have seemed unthinkable when you look back to the once-in-a-generation hype that was put on him out of college. It would have seemed unthinkable after his emergence in the second half of the 2022 season, but right now, it's honestly not impossible. Which is why the second half of this season is so important for Lawrence, Cohen, and new general manager James Gladstone. This is a final chance to show the rest of the league that their starting quarterback can still be the player that fans thought they were getting out of Clemson in 2021. Because right now, he's on course to be one of the biggest letdowns in league history. He's obviously not a bust in the Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell category, but it's so rare to have a number one pick like Trevor Lawrence, a guy who is head and shoulders above everyone else in his class and tipped for a place in Canton before he'd even taken an NFL snap, to be in this position. For Lawrence to silence the doubters in this league, the Jaguars simply have to make the playoffs this season. Admittedly, they, like everyone else in the NFL, have been blindsided by Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts, but the Jags are only 2 games behind them and have one of the easier schedules in football this year. They can still look forward to 2 games with the Titans, as well as games with the Raiders, Jets, and Cardinals, amongst others, showing there are absolutely wins to pick up on this schedule. And if they can at least split the series with Indianapolis, they might even have a shot at taking back their AFC South crown. But they will need Lawrence to step up in order to do that. They'll need him to cut out the sloppy interceptions and fumbles, and they'll need him to be more accurate in the simple throws, especially on third down, where the Jaguars rank 4th last in the league for conversion. And they'll need him to step up in the big games down the stretch, against Indianapolis, Denver, and the LA Chargers in particular, with all 3 of these teams being potential rivals for AFC playoff seedings. If he can show maturity and composure in these big games and bring the Jags back to the playoffs, he'll strike a major blow to the doubters. His elite talent is never the question. Rather, the question is whether or not he'll make the most of it. And he does still have time to do that, but he's under more pressure than he's ever been as his career ticks on. 5 years ago, the Jaguars drafted Trevor Lawrence to end their misery and start a dynasty. Instead, they got something far murkier. A quarterback who looks elite one week and lost the next. A player who can flash greatness, but can't seem to sustain it. Maybe that's who Trevor Lawrence really is. Good enough to believe in, but not quite good enough to deliver. Or maybe the story isn't over yet. Maybe this is just the part of the movie where we all lose faith before the comeback begins. Either way, one thing's certain. Trevor Lawrence hasn't just tested the Jaguars' patience, he's tested all of ours. But what do you think? Has Trevor Lawrence fooled everyone, or have we just been fooling ourselves? Drop your thoughts below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, hit the like button, and subscribe for more NFL content all season long.